people say, well, I have to do what I hate because I have to struggle forward in life. I don't like my job, but I have to do it. And I understand that, because the fundamental condition of mankind is one of essential privation, right? I mean, without food, we starve, and food doesn't just make itself manifest of its own accord. Without shelter, we freeze or we burn. Without water, we die of thirst. And it takes effort to provide that, and it takes communication and cooperation and competition and sacrifice. And sacrifice, that's work. There's no difference, by the way. This is a good key if you ever dip into biblical writings, for example. There's no difference between sacrifice and work. They're the same thing. The idea that God is pleased by sacrifice is the same idea as if you work hard, things will get better. It's the precursor to that more secular formulation. Are there sacrifices that please God? Well, what does that mean? It means, are there things you could do now that would put the future right? And the answer is, well, if you work, you say yes, because what you're doing when you're working is sacrificing the momentary pleasures of the present for something approximating medium to long-term survival. And it's not like that's going to make you happy necessarily, although it might keep you alive, which arguably is better than being happy. Happy for a brief while, then dead is not a very good story. That's the story of someone too radically hedonistic and impulsive. And so human beings, we can apprehend ourselves across time, right? We know that you bear a responsibility for who you are right now, and maybe to be happy as you can be in the moment, let's say, or at least as free from catastrophic anxiety and anger and depression as you might be. But that's not good enough, because you have to take account of yourself tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, right? You become an adult. You live across the decades, certainly the years, perhaps the decades, and you have to govern your behavior in the present in the knowledge of your future, with the heavy knowledge of your future self at hand. And if you have any sense, and we do from time to time have some sense, you don't compromise who you're going to be in a month for who you are right now, and maybe you don't compromise who you're going to be when you retire for who you are right now when you're 30. You have to take that expansive view, which includes you iterating across time, right? You have to treat yourself like you're a community in time. Each person is a community in time. And so the biblical injunction, which is treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated, is a reflection of the fundamental fact that there is actually no difference in the truest sense between establishing productive, generous harmony, reciprocal harmony with other people, and treating yourself properly. It's the same rule set. It's the same rule set, and by necessity. And that's not arbitrary. It has nothing to do with like a relative morality. There aren't other ways of going about it. Given that you're going to exist across time, you have to bind your actions in the present by that knowledge. I suppose you could eliminate the necessity of that by sacrificing your consciousness, right? Your self-consciousness, your apprehension of your vulnerability across time. And by the way, that's exactly what you do if you drink alcohol, right? Because alcohol does exactly that. It delimits the effect of the future on your present behavior. And that can be Dionysian level of fun. But there's tomorrow. And that's the problem. And it's not just tomorrow. It's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And then it's all the other people around you too. And that's the same problem. And so you're constrained or regulated in your action by the necessity of sacrificing the present, not completely, but sacrificing the present for the future. And that's the discovery of work. It's what separates, one of the things that separates human beings from animals is that we have to do that. And it's better to do that, even though it's not easy. And even though maybe you have to do things you hate. Well, then we can let's delve into that a bit. You have to toil. when God kicks Adam and Eve out of paradise for the sin of pride, essentially, he tells Adam, you're going to have to toil in the dirt, and it'll feed you, but you'll generate thorns, and you'll sacrifice and sweat and struggle. And that's definitely life. And so you might say, well, that's hateful. And look, subsistence level farming, let's say, how people lived for generations, just hand to mouth, barely scraping by. That can be pretty damn brutal. But it does still beg the question, even when you're struggling, are there ways that you can struggle that make things maybe not even merely bearable, although that would be a start, but maybe acceptable, and then maybe beyond that, joyful, if you could manage it? And those of you who've worked in working class jobs, brutal, difficult working class jobs, you know that if you get the camaraderie right, that's a big plus, And then the fact that you're toiling and suffering together can produce a kind of transcendence. It's that part of the reason the relationships can become so deep, this often happens with military personnel, is because the challenge is so great, and the shared identity of confronting that challenge together can produce a social revelation that is compensation for the catastrophe. And so even if things are difficult, the question still remains, what could you do better to make this better? And then we might say too, do not do what you hate. Well, you have to discipline yourself. And that means you have to put yourself in harness, and you might strive against that, like a horse that's being broken, and you might say, well, what a catastrophe to break a horse, or to train a dog to pull a sledge, but we have to be disciplined, and to do that, you have to subject yourself to strictures and constraints, and you have to play by the rules. And I suppose, as Nietzsche pointed out, you waste a lot of yourself doing that, by adopting some regulated and disciplined structure. Maybe that's your job, or one relationship instead of many. It's a narrowing and a limiting, but at the same time, it's a fostering of your ability to concentrate with single-minded intensity and purpose on an actual goal instead of a hypothetical plethora of goals. And there's no difference between that and being mature. And being mature is better than being a child, even though we seem to have forgotten that in our culture. Now, there's a step beyond that even, where the injunction is to leave childhood and to become mature, and then to rediscover what you lost in childhood. And maybe that's something like the spirit of play and that open-eyed amazement that children naturally bring to the world. And if you can incorporate that back into your psyche once you've become mature and disciplined, well, then you get to have your cake and eat it too. And that's something that's in principle worth striving for. And I say you get a glimpse of that, when at the end of a difficult day, maybe you go to the local country music bar and there's a hot band playing, and you get a chance to dance with someone you love, and you get to play, and you think, and all the notes are stacked on top of each other perfectly, reflecting the intrinsic harmony of the world itself, and you align yourself with that. You do that with someone you love, and you get that spirit of play infusing you, because in some sense you were disciplined enough to make the money that allowed you to afford to go to the damn bar, And so that's not such a bad deal, and it's at least a glimpse of the way things could be if you really got your act together, so that you were disciplined and aiming true and playful all at the same time, even when dire circumstances confront you. And that's the sign of a real master, and that's a receding ideal. I mean, who could claim to have managed that? But I can't see that you have anything better to do.